Coaching Soccer Weekly, episode 336. The problem with youth soccer. Entertaining, educational, and inspiring soccer content to help make you a more effective coach, player, or soccer parent. Hello, and welcome back to Coaching Soccer Weekly, presented by World Class Coaching. My name is Sagib Rabinovich, and this is the podcast devoted to bringing you cutting-edge methods, techniques, and tactics for coaching soccer. It doesn't matter if you're an experienced coach who has been training teams for many years, or if you're new to coaching and working with a team for the very first time. There's something we can all do to take our coaching to the next level. Welcome back to the show. This weekend, let's start by talking about the games during the weekend. We had one game with our 2010s, and then two games at the same time, 2012, 2013. And before I start going into the game, this is brought to you by the amazing company that we all love, Vio. I'm starting to see a lot more Vios just out there on the field, which is fantastic. And I'm starting to see a lot more VO2s, which I really, really want. I really want to stream my games. I think that would be so cool to just be able to watch the games anywhere around the world, live. And if that ever does happen, I'll share that with you. I'll share that link. Hopefully I can. I'm not really sure how that works, but what a cool idea to be able to have someone's grandparents who are in another country be able to watch their grandchild play, or just relatives. You know, we had someone from Greece come and watch one of our players today. Their family came in from Greece, and that was really cool. How cool would it be if they could watch their family member every single week? So if you're looking for a VO for your academy or club, it's a great tool, records the games, creates highlight by itself through this amazing software that they have. You can use code CSW100. That's Coaching Soccer Weekly 100. And yeah, so let's talk about the weekend. Well, the game started with our 2010s, and our 2010s, as I mentioned, they are very depleted. We have 9 players that are away, and it's going to be like that this weekend as well. So everyone came, and I think only had like 1 or 2 subs this weekend too. So it was actually pretty good. It was a lot better than the previous weeks. We played on a beautiful turf field, and I guess historically, which it's funny that I say historically, but through this whole past season, every single one of our teams has struggled when we play on turf field. And I think we struggled a little bit today getting the passes from our fullbacks to our attacking mids in that 4-3-1 from the wide space, in the wide space. When the fullback has the ball, they pass it down the wide space, and the attacking mid goes into that wide space to receive the ball. The passes were they wouldn't connect. The fullback, who's used to playing on grass and, longer grass, would hit that ball just a little bit too hard. And there were, I would say, at least 10 passes that were just too hard. So we're really not used to playing on that turf field. But compared to our previous games, I think we did really well. Again, a lot to work on with this team, but we're starting to get players back, and it's making a big difference. So we ended up, I think, winning the game like 3-2 or something like that, but a step in the right direction, right? And really kept possession. I wouldn't say most of the game, but I would say, a decent amount of time. We're going to be playing this team again this weekend, just the way the schedule works, and it'll end up being pretty much the same team. So playing on another turf field this week, which would be, which we'll see what happens. So I'll tell you about that on next week. So after that game, we had our 2013s and 2012s playing at the exact same times. And just like our 2010s, our 2012s and 2013s are also depleted with a lot of players away. At the beginning of the season, we had, with our 2013s, we were able to put in 2 teams, like we had 12 players, right, in one team. So we had 13 players, sometimes even 14 players. So we would have 6 on the bench, 6 playing. And now we have 1 sub. So we had 2 subs this weekend. So as you can see, it's just that time of the summer, I guess. And our 2012s, we had 3 players away, and that team doesn't have a lot of players to start with. So what ended up happening was that because the 2012s and 13s were playing side by side, I would literally just call out the player who was sitting on the bench in the 2013 game. They would run over and they would play with us, the 2012 team. So every single or almost every single player on that 2013 team got to come over to the other side and play with the 2012s. Now, the 2013s struggled a lot in that game, but if we look back at where the 2012s were, it's pretty much in the same boat. In the winter, they were losing games 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-0 at certain points, but that was us just really trying to build out of the back and really trying to do the right thing. So ended up losing that game 6-0. But whenever I looked over, it seemed like, we were connecting some passes here and there, just not making the right decision, which is okay because it's their first time playing. Just about that whole team is brand new, so not really worried about that. Our 2012s, we had one of our players, brand new to the team, just kind of came in, so put him at forward, and it was his first experience there. And then the 2013s would come in as well. So 2 out of the 7 players were brand new, but I thought we did okay. We've definitely had better games, but we kept possession most of the time. And the only thing I would say would be we didn't use our goalkeeper as much. And I talked about that yesterday in the VO meeting, but ended up winning that game 2-0. So all in all, I think every team is stepping in the right direction, which is really what the most important thing is, right? Moving in that right direction, even though sometimes we're losing, sometimes we're winning. I don't really care about that. We're playing. Oh, so let's talk about this weekend. Sorry. So our 2012s are actually going to be playing up a couple of years this weekend simply because we just don't have players. So it's going to be a combination of 2010s and 2012s that are going to be there for the game on Saturday, and then they're going to stay and play their game. I won't be there, unfortunately, because I got to coach the 2010s and 13s, but it's going to be a really good experience. We've had some of those 2012s play up with the 2010s, and what's interesting is when they play up, the team plays better because the 2012s are our longest team that's been playing in league. So they've been playing, this is their 3rd season. Our 2010s, this is their 2nd season, and for our 2013s, it's their 1st season. So I'm really excited to hear about how they did in the weekend. I wanted to share with you a really interesting development with Shark Attack that one of my coaches thought of, and I absolutely love this. And first of all, I just want to say how important it is to have good coaches with you, people that you can trust and people that you can rely on to really get your message across and have the same values and beliefs as you do. I always say that, it's funny, I always say that I never go and try and poach players. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. I would rather poach a coach than a player, right? And if you're poaching players, I don't think you're seeing the big picture. What's great is that our coaches work with every single one of our teams, so they see all of our players. So when we lose a game 6-0, it's really not a big deal because the next hour they're going to go and they're going to play with the 2000. They're going to coach the 2010s or the 2012s or the 2013s. So they don't really, they see the whole picture, and I think that's really important. Coaches that poach players, I think, are more individual coaches, and what I mean by that are coaches that just have a team. They have one team, and that's it. All they see is that one team. All they think about is that one team, and that can get pretty intimidating, I think, if you are losing 4, 5, 6 games and you can't really see the bigger picture. It's going to make it really tough. So I'm really happy that I'm able to do this with all of our coaches. They can have relationships with all of our players. And so let's talk about this Shark Attack part of the game. So for all those who don't know what Shark Attack is, it's a game that we use. It's an introductory game. We use it at all our levels, and here's the way it works. You have a grid. I use 16 by 16 steps, not yards, and they're average steps. They're not like I had one of our new coaches. He's a really big guy, and he took big steps, and it was just a giant field, 16 by 16. So that was pretty funny. But no, they're just average steps, so like you would be going for a walk. So 16 by 16. And here's the way the game works. Everyone has a ball. They're inside the blue. I do it with blue cones, so they're inside the water, and they're sharks inside the water. Your job is to kick someone else's ball outside of the water. If your ball gets kicked out of the water, then you've got to do X amount of moves, and then you can come back into the game. And we can do it for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. The player with the most amount of balls kicked out wins the game, and I like to have them call out as they kick someone's ball out. So if they kick out one, they'll say one, then they'll kick out another one, they'll say two, three, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, one of my coaches had the idea of, what if we just kind of kick one ball out and then that ball's out for good, but the player is still in. So we've done this in similar games. We've done this in a version of Stuck in the Mud, okay, that we had before. But what we had in Stuck in the Mud was that if your ball gets kicked out, you help. But in this situation, what I loved was that if your ball gets kicked out, you go in and you try and steal someone else's ball. So let's say we start with 10 balls, okay? And I'm dribbling, and everyone's trying to kick someone else's ball, and someone kicks my ball out. Now there's only 9 balls on the field. So now it's my job to go and try and steal someone else's. So what you have now is 9 other players still trying to kick the ball out, and you have 1 player trying to steal the ball. So you have all these different types of players trying to get at your ball. You have a player with a ball getting at your ball. You have a player without the ball getting at your ball. And it just creates one of the best environments I've ever seen for just shielding and Cruyff turns, which is something that we talk about with our shark attack games. And let's say of those 9 players, someone else kicks someone else's ball out, right? So now you've got 8 players with a ball, 2 players without a ball, and it just gets progressively harder and harder. And eventually what you have by the end of the game is you'll have 2 players with a ball, and then you'll have 8 players without a ball. And you'll have, physical battles, and maybe 4 players go for 1 ball, 4 players go for another ball. And it's a really, really interesting environment where players are just so much, their stress on the ball is so much more heightened than it would be in the game. So we're creating an environment that's harder than the game, right? And for me, it was absolutely brilliant. So I thought I'd share that with you, but I've just started doing that, and it's been amazing. Like, Shark Attack has gotten so much more competitive. By the time our 2010s have done this, I guess, for a long time now, to the point where if we just do regular Shark Attack, they're not really going to go for each other's balls. They kind of see it as, oh, let's go talk to each other. But in this way, to kind of mix this in, it really gets them engaged, and just the level just increases, which is absolutely fantastic. So thought I'd share that with you before we go into the main topic of the day. Well, there's no segue that I can think of for this, but I wanted to share this with you, and maybe this will be something that I do every once in a while. And this is a random tip, just a random tip that I think is going to help everyone. Because whether you're a soccer coach, a player, a parent, whatever you are, you've probably faced this issue. And I'm not embarrassed to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it right here. The issue is smelly soccer shoes. I know what you're thinking. Segev, where have you been? I've been dealing with this my whole life. Me too. To the point where I've thrown out some of my soccer shoes because they smelled so bad. That's been life. And I found an answer. For it. And here it is. Really simple. All you got to do is buy green tea, the green tea bags. I've put in 3 green tea bags in my sock shoe. I know it sounds weird. I know. But trust me on this. Every time I play, I obviously take them out. And then as soon as I'm done, I put them back in. And it's been in there, in and out for about a week. And I got to tell you, it smells bearable now. Before it was so bad. But now, yeah, so that's the random tip of the day. Use green tea bags. I used 3. That's how bad the smell was, to make your shoes smell better. And it works. It works. It works. It works. So, yeah. And let's be honest here. I'm not sponsored by green tea. This is not a ploy by the green tea company to get more sales. I promise. I found this randomly on the internet, so I wanted to share it with you because it works. And if you have kids and they have smelly soccer shoes, maybe even smelly hockey equipment, I don't know. Maybe smelly skates, I don't know. I haven't tried skates, but it works with soccer shoes. So it's not chemically, it's not any of that. There are these shoe deodorant things, and I just was not comfortable spraying those in my feet. I don't know why, but this is very natural. And I haven't switched the bags at all. So it's the same 6 bags in there every single time. And the bags don't smell. The shoes smell better. So, yeah, hopefully that helps you. I want to start talking about controversial issues that are going on in soccer. I don't mind getting opinionated and all that when it comes to youth soccer. That's never been a problem for me. So hopefully what I say today will make sense, and hopefully you can get behind it. What I love about what I do in general is that I like to solve problems. So I will always start with the problem, but I'm not going to be the podcast that just complains. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in complaining. I do believe that you can present the problem, but if you present a problem, then you should be able to present a solution. So I'm going to be doing both of those things today. I'm going to talk about the problem, and then I'll talk about the solution as well that I think will really help boost youth soccer. Now, when I'm talking about youth soccer, unfortunately, I can't really talk about other countries because, it's not for me to speculate. I've played soccer in the U.S., so I can maybe lump that in a little bit, but that was over 10 years ago, so things can change. So I don't really know what's going on in the U.S. right now. So I'll talk about just kind of Canada and what I've noticed as an academy owner, being part of conversations with Ontario Soccer, being part of conversation with the local district that we have. So all those things here, I'll talk about the problems that I see, and I'll talk about the solutions. Because just talking about it isn't going to fix anything. So I opened up my academy because I wanted to be part of these conversations, and I have been. And I've raised these issues, and I've given my suggestions on how to solve these problems, right, in these conversations with president of Ontario Soccer or the president of the local district here. Now, it's not all bad news. I don't want you to think that, I think that Ontario Soccer is doing a terrible job. No. That's not it. In fact, I think that actually up to U12, I think they're doing a great job. I think the leagues are very competitive. And what I love about it up till U12 is that you can put your kids, your players, into any division you want. As a coach, you have the freedom to put them in tier 1, tier 2, whatever you want in that situation. You even have the option of going into a different district if you get permission from your district. So that's a little bit more complicated, and there are certain rules for that, which I'm not going to get into. But there are so many different options for you as a coach up till U12 for your team. And if your team is really, really good, you could put them in that top division and play against players of their same likeness, which is a word that I'm going to be using a lot today. However, after U12, we go into U13, and that's where the problem starts. For me, the problem is really within that older bracket, right? The U13 and up. And we're going to go a little bit into a similar situation that happened in Europe with the Super League. For those that don't know, the Super League was essentially an effort by the richest teams in the world to come together and create one league. And that was essentially the top league that wasn't sanctioned under FIFA or anything like that.
And the problem with that was the same problem that I personally believe in North American sports. And the reason that I'm not a hockey fan anymore. When I was a kid, I was such a big Toronto Maple Leaf fan, huge Maple Leaf fan. And then they had one year where they were the worst team in the league, and it was because they wanted to get Austin Matthews in the draft, who was the best player coming into the draft. And we, as Leaf fans, would cheer when they would lose because we were one step closer to getting Austin Matthews. And when you're cheering and wanting to lose, ugh, that doesn't really sit right with me. The ability to continuously lose and be bad and not really have any repercussions, right? Because the Leafs, when I grew up, they were one of the best teams in the league. I mean, playoffs consistently. We did well in the playoffs. I remember epic battles between us, Ottawa, and it was a different time. And then we just kind of had this stretch where we weren't good at all, and nothing really happened. No one cared. And what was the most interesting, at least I think, arenas were still full. So the Leaf, the people in charge of the Toronto Maple Leafs, didn't really care. I mean, eventually things happened, but it wasn't a dire situation like you see now in Manchester United, for example, or you see in the last weeks of relegation battles. That is what I think sports should be about. If you're good enough to play, you should be good enough to play and play in that league. If you're not trying, get out. Right? This isn't, we're not here at the professional level. I would say you 13 and up, if you don't care, if you are not providing top training, top, player development, and you're just kind of in that top league for no reason, like the Super League would have been, wouldn't really have made sense. And that's the problem we have here in Ontario. We have a program called the OPDL program. And to get into the OPDL program, there's a lot of criterias. And essentially, it's a Super League because only the rich clubs around here can afford it. To the point where, in order to play in the OPDL, some clubs charge players $5,000 a season, not a year, a season, to be part of this league. And there's no argument that I can think of that the best players in the vicinity of your club are able to afford that. It doesn't make sense because I know from running an academy, there are families, in different situations and things like that. And historically, if we look at the best players in the world and where they came from, they didn't come from very wealthy families. And, growing up, we saw this in Brazil, at least I did. Brazil, when I was growing up, oh my goodness. And still, Neymar from Brazil. There are so many other players that have come from financially tough backgrounds. And that's really where the best players come from. It's just historically that's where it's been. So to create a league where money is a barrier to entry is a huge issue. And for me, if we can solve that problem, and the answer is pretty simple, and I'll get into that in a little bit, then I think, just like up to the U12s, I think Canada would be a huge force because we have some fantastic youth players, but they just don't really get the chance, right? So that for me is the problem within youth soccer in Canada. Before, I go into the solution, let's give both sides of the argument here about why the OPDL is a great idea. I think originally the OPDL was considered a great idea. And there's two arguments, I would say. I think the first argument would be the success of the women's program. Most of the players on that go into the national team.
for the women's program were from the OPDL, and they came in from that. And the Canadian soccer women's program, I mean, you know how I feel about that. It's one of my favorite things. But there's a problem with that. And that was that when it started and up until maybe 3-4 years ago, Canada had a head start. And we look at the countries around the world that had a head start with soccer and professional programs, and they did a really, really well for a very long time. And that's what we had in Canada. We had a head start, just like the US, with having women play in very competitive leagues. We had, as Canadians, access to that a lot more than Europeans, in that a lot of our great players will go to US colleges, go play in the professional women's league there. So our women were getting the best of the best for a long period of time, but that's gone now. Women's soccer in Europe has completely taken off. And what we're seeing here in Canada specifically is that our best players are moving to Europe to play. And because it's just the best league for them. I listened to a podcast of two of my favorite Canadian women national team players, and they were just talking about how the level is so much tougher in the UK where they play. One plays for City and one plays for Chelsea. And that's a problem. It's a problem now because the OPDL, while it was great, now other countries are catching up. So I don't think that argument is going to work anymore, and I think we're starting to see it. The women's team, the U20s, it's, I don't know if a lot of people know, but it's the World Cup for the women's under 20. Canada lost their first 2 games, and now they're not going through. So once was dominant isn't dominant anymore. And we were dominant. Even in the youth ages, like, we were great. But now people are catching up. Countries are catching up. So that argument, don't agree with so much. Second argument, which is probably the one that they like to make a lot more, is the standards. I'm all for having standards, don't get me wrong. And they would say things like, it's very crucial for you to have a facility. It's very crucial for you to have a physiotherapist there on the field. It's very crucial for you to have this, that, all these different instruments that are supposed to help develop players. And again, I don't really buy that. If we look at the best players in history, did they have that growing up? Even at U13, U14? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, Pele, Maradona, right? You look at the Brazilian Ronaldo, Figo, you know? These are players that they didn't grow up having beautiful soccer facilities and athletic trainers and this and that. No, they grew up on the streets playing soccer in a very competitive environment. And if we're taking that away, we're not really thinking about the soccer anymore. It's more about the business side. And that's why I just don't think that argument works anymore. I don't think we're putting soccer first. I don't think we're putting players first. I don't think we're putting accessibility to the game, which is probably one of the most important things. Soccer shouldn't be expensive. It really shouldn't. All you need is a ball and a net. Sometimes you don't even need nets to train, right? You just need a ball. That's it. Why is it $5,000 a season? Makes no sense. So, I mean, I know I kind of went into a tangent there, but I just don't believe these arguments anymore, and I don't think the OPDL program works. I just don't. I don't think if you're training 5 times a week, it necessarily makes it different if your coach doesn't train you the right way. You could train 7 days a week. That doesn't mean you're going to get better than someone who trains 3 times a week and does the right things. If you, as a coach, are training teams and you're training 5 times a week, but half of your practice is players in line and they end up on the ball or running around instead of the hour practice that you have, they're running around for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. What's the point? What's the point in doing 7 days, 5 days a week? It doesn't make sense. Your body also needs recovery. It's none of this adds up to me. If you can run great sessions 3 times a week with your players engaged for a full hour, running, moving, that's so much better. Why do you need a turf field? We've played on games in dirt this year. We've played more than half of our games were dirt or bumpy fields. What do your players do then if they're used to turf fields? I had a parent come in one time and said, "Oh, I love the training. I love all this, all that, but I just can't get over the field you're practicing on." That's what you can't get over? Really? The training's great, but the field is the problem? So what happens when we go to a team like we're going to this weekend that plays on a dirt field? What do if we're not used to that? So OPDL, I don't know. But yeah, that's in a nutshell the problem, kind of what they think. And now I'm going to give you the solution, which I think sounds pretty easy, but it'll probably upset a lot of people. So here we go.
For me, competition is the most important thing. I think you have to be competitive. I believe in kind of that 50-50. I want my teams to be in that middle pack. I think the solution to this OPDL problem is promotion relegation, which does exist. Don't get me wrong. It exists here in Ontario, but it's not the top level. I think if you are good enough to go throughout and win every single game, you should be able to move up until you can't do that anymore. The biggest proof that we see here in Ontario is that there's a club. They're a newer club, a lot older than us, but still newer compared to the other clubs that are out there. And which, clubs here have been around for 100 years, 50 years, 60 years. So they've been here for a long time. This club very regularly has won the Ontario Cup. And that's where the best teams, all teams in Ontario participate. It's a big kind of push, a lot of OPDL teams. But this team just continuously wins it. And guess what? They're not part of OPDL. So if the teams that are winning the best tournament in Ontario are not even in the OPDL, what does that say about the OPDL program, right? If we have a promotion relegation system, what that's going to do is a lot of things. The promotion relegation will allow teams of different age groups to be placed in the right environment for them to develop players, because you don't always need to be at the very top to get better. In fact, I'll give you a perfect example. I lived in the U.S. During my freshman year, which is grade 8, and grade 8 and 9, So last year of middle school, first year of high school was my freshman year in the States, and then I came back. When I was in Kansas had some of the best high school basketball that I've ever seen. Maybe not in the U.S., I don't know, but I came in and there were 4 teams, like a B, C, and D team, and I played, learned so much. I came back to Toronto my grade 10 year, and because of that experience, I made the varsity team here in Toronto at my local high school. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to play a lot. And my friends, who I was much better than at basketball at that point, they played the whole season. Got a lot of game time, all this, all that. Next season came, and because I didn't play basically the whole year, I wasn't as good as them. They got experience in the games, in that situation, and eventually I was just a bench warmer, simply because I wasn't in the right level at that point to get better. We hear about lots of players that go down in baseball to the minors, come back up, especially in hockey as well, right? We hear about players in soccer going on loan for a while and then coming back, and now they're performing. This is what we're talking about. This is development. So when you have an OPDL and you have scores like 8-0, 10-0, what's going on? Why are these teams there? Because they're wealthy, because they can pay it. If instead we allow the teams that are the best to just move up and down, then we really create a competitive league. And that's what I had growing up here in Canada. There was no OPDL. The best teams were the best teams, and they would move up and up and up until they would get to the highest level, and that was it. Now, here's the question. Who's going to suffer if this promotion relegation, if that's true? And one, the association will 100%, they'll lose money, and that's pretty big. But the clubs could argue, and this is the argument that they were talking about when I brought this up. We've invested so much money into facilities, athletic trainers, this, that, all these regulations that were enforced by Ontario Soccer to become part of the OPDL. And to that, I would say, one, that has nothing to do with soccer. That's a business type of expense. That is a marketing tool that you can use for your club or academy. You can say we have this to attract players. But what does that have to do with soccer? It shouldn't have an impact on what league your 2010s are in or what league your 2008s are in. That should be based on soccer alone. That should be how good is that team. I have teams, and all of you know this as listeners, I have teams that are of different ages, that are of different skill levels, and are at different points of their soccer journey. Our 2012 is fantastic. I think they could go to Tier 1. Our 2013s aren't ready, so they're going to stay in Tier 2, right? Ages they're different. And because players are different and teams are different at different points of their soccer journeys, I think that should be reflected in what leagues they play in as well. And we don't have that with the OPDL.
And I know the U.S. has the exact same issue, just simply because I've listened to so many podcasts within the U.S. youth structure. For me, until we get a completely promotion relegation system for every single age group, I don't think things are going to change. And it's unfortunate because of the success of the men's team now. Now we're at a point where the men's team has done so well, but if you look at where most of the men are playing, they're not really playing in Canada. There isn't much in Canada. Yes, you can argue the MLS. Yes, we now have a professional league here in Canada called the CPL, but out of all the players there on the Canadian men's national team, I think maybe one or two came from that, and that's not good enough. If you look at the Bundesliga, if you look at the English Premier League, a lot of their players that are playing for their national team are playing for their professional team. Even the U.S., a lot of their players are coming from the MLS. So it's just not adding up. And unfortunately, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but the success of the men's team, in my opinion, has always been, and I've said this on the show, is the amazing coach that we have. His ability to find players that are all over the world that have some sort of Canadian past, that is his greatest strength. And his recruitment is unbelievable. But we're not helping him, and that's an issue. And now we're starting to see it on the girl side. By now it's Thursday, and the Canadian women's national team played their last game of the round robin in the World Cup of the U20s and didn't win a single match. So there's going to be a big shift. And just to understand the amazingness of John Herdman and what he has done for Canadian soccer is to understand the youth system in Canadian soccer and realize how he doesn't really have a pool of players here. So his ability to create a team that is qualified for the World Cup is so underrated. It really is. There just aren't that many people talking about how successful he has been. Whether we do well or not do well in the World Cup, that's a different story, and that's something completely different. But just to get to this point is absolutely amazing. So I think this is a really big problem, like a really, really big problem. And once we stop putting money first and we start putting the soccer first and understanding that if soccer businesses, clubs, academies want to have amazing facilities, want to have physiotherapists at their session, want to have, UEFA A, UEFA B coaches, that's fantastic. I love that. But that's a marketing tool. That's not a tool that should prevent players from playing soccer at the highest level. I just don't believe in that. I don't believe that the fact that a physiotherapist is on the field or that you're playing on a turf field makes you a better team than a team that practices on a dirt field. It just doesn't add up. Don't get me wrong again. I'm not saying that turf fields, that amazing facilities, that physiotherapists, that amazing coaches with very high level licenses is a bad thing. In fact, that's something that I want for my academy. But I don't think that that's going to replace the quality of our training. I don't think that should have a place in me getting into a higher league. It's just a marketing tool that I can go up to a parent and say, listen, not only do we have great training, but we also have this, and this, and a great environment for your kid. And that's it, right? It's a great marketing tool, but that's where it should stop. And unfortunately, with the way Ontario Soccer has been doing things, it's not. It's the whole picture now. And I just don't agree with that. So that's my little controversial opinion. Let me know what you think. Let's get a conversation going. I don't mind, You can put your comments in episode 336 on coachingsoccerweekly.com, and let's have a conversation about this kind of stuff. I really want to do more of this. If you think there's an issue out there and I should talk about it, I don't mind. I'd love to. Let's get stuff out there, and at least let's get the conversation going. Whether you agree, disagree, the most important thing is let's talk about it. Let's at least have a conversation, because that's when things change. That's when people become more aware, when it becomes a conversation. I have to apologize because I've been really bad at posting our games, and I know that, and it'll get better, I promise. But the whole summer has just been a blur with camp, training. There are days when I leave the house at 6:45 and don't come back till 9 o'clock at night. So it's been kind of a challenge with that. Next week is going to be even worse. Next week I'm running my own camp. So far up till now, I've been part of a camp. Now I'm running my own gladiator camp just for our players, and that's going to go till later. So hopefully I'll be back next week. If not, there might be a chance that I'll take the week off. But I will really, really try to come with an episode. This week is going to be a really interesting game week. So I'm really excited to talk about that and see how it goes. Unfortunately, I won't be there for the 2012 game, which is, the 2012-2010 game, which is the one that I really want to see how the 2012s do playing with the 2 years up. But I will try and keep you posted and hear what my other coach has to say on how they played. Thanks for listening to another episode of Coaching Soccer Weekly. I think it's really important to reflect on these things. What are some things that your district is or your association is doing well? What are some challenges that they're having? Up till U12, I really, really love the way that programs are being run in youth soccer. But after that, I think there's a lot of work to do to get us to where we need to be a powerhouse again in women's soccer and in men's soccer too. I think it's a definite possibility. There are some fantastic players here. I want to thank VO for sponsoring the show. And if you're looking for a VO, they just came up with some updates on their software. And there's the VO2. So much amazing things going on with them. So you can use CSW 100 if you're looking for a VO. But until next week, enjoy the journey, enjoy the moments, but most importantly, enjoy the game. Coaching Soccer Weekly is a production of World Class Coaching. All rights reserved.
Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end, and you can check out more of our videos right here. And if you haven't done so already, I would really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and the subscribe button.